What happens when cinema throws away its rules and dives headfirst into chaos, blood, and depravity? Welcome to the world of Grindhouse horror, where taboos are shattered, budgets are low, but the impact is unforgettable. These aren't your typical scary movies. These are the dark, sleazy cult classics that made audiences squirm and scream. Here are 17 Grindhouse classics every horror fan must see. Buckle up. This ride gets ugly fast. I Drink Your Blood, 1970. It starts with meat pies and ends in a bloodbath. In I Drink Your Blood, a quiet rural town is invaded by a group of devil-worshipping hippies. After they assault a young boy's sister, the boy decides to get revenge the only way a 1970 Grindhouse film could dream up, by injecting rabid dog blood into their food. What follows is utter madness, foaming mouths, savage attacks, and an outbreak of violence that spirals into apocalyptic chaos. Director David E. Durston created one of the first films to ever receive an X rating purely for violence, and it wears that badge proudly. This isn't a movie, it's a fever dream soaked in psychedelic horror and nihilistic tension. It shattered the peace-love image of the hippie generation and turned them into snarling monsters. Audiences didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or walk out, and many did all three. It was banned, recut, and released in various forms, but the film's gritty rawness remains unmatched. I Drink Your Blood turned rabies into a metaphor for cultural breakdown, and for Grindhouse fans, it was love at first infection. The Last House on the Left, 1972. When Wes Craven released The Last House on the Left, he didn't just break the rules, he obliterated them. Inspired by Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, this film begins with two teenage girls heading to a concert. But their innocent day devolves into a nightmare when they're kidnapped and brutalized by a group of sadistic criminals. What separates Last House from other exploitation films is its unbearable realism. Craven forces viewers to witness the cruelty not in stylized shots, but in long, ugly scenes that feel ripped from a snuff film. There's no monster, no supernatural twist, just the terrifying truth of what people are capable of. The final act flips the power dynamic when the killers unknowingly take refuge in the home of one of the victims. What follows is vigilante justice, soaked in blood and moral ambiguity. Can revenge heal, or does it rot you from within? Audiences left theaters stunned, some vomiting, others enraged. But Craven had made his point. Horror isn't about what goes bump in the night. It's about what walks beside us in daylight. The Last House on the Left remains one of the most disturbing, emotionally scarring films in Grindhouse history. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Few films in the annals of horror are as notorious or as deeply unsettling as Cannibal Holocaust. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, it's often called the most banned movie of all time. The film follows a rescue team sent into the Amazon to find a missing documentary crew. What they discover are the gruesome remains and the crew's footage. That footage, the first major use of found footage horror, is so realistic that Deodato was briefly arrested and charged with making a snuff film. But the real horror isn't just what's on screen, it's the mirror the film holds up to us. The American filmmakers, supposedly civilized, are revealed to be the true savages, staging atrocities for the sake of sensationalism. From impalings to real-life animal killings, Cannibal Holocaust is a relentless assault on your nerves and your ethics. It asks, who are the real cannibals? The jungle tribes? Or the men with cameras and scripts? Yes, it's a grotesque film, but it's also a brilliant deconstruction of media manipulation, violence, and exploitation. It's the movie that makes horror fans question whether they're watching horror or becoming part of it. Blood Feast, 1963. It's loud, it's crude, it's barely coherent, and it changed horror forever. Blood Feast, directed by Herschel Gordon Lewis, is the godfather of all gore films. Before this, horror relied on shadows and suspense. Lewis threw that out the window and hurled buckets of fake blood into the audience's lap. The plot? A demented caterer murders women to resurrect an ancient Egyptian goddess. But the real draw isn't the story, it's the spectacle. Tongues ripped out, limbs hacked, eyeballs stabbed, and all done with such cheerful amateurism that it borders on surreal. Released in drive-ins with the promise of nothing held back, Blood Feast had viewers fainting, walking out, and telling their friends. It made over $4 million on a budget of just $24,000, and it birthed a whole new horror subgenre: splatter. Lewis didn't care about good taste, he cared about audience reaction. He weaponized gore as a carnival attraction, and in doing so, set the tone for Grindhouse horror's shock-first philosophy. Blood Feast isn't just a film, it's a warning. From here on, horror gets messy. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. It opens with a sound, mechanical, alien, unnerving. Then a grainy photograph of death. Welcome to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the air is thick with dread and every frame feels contaminated. Directed by Tobe Hooper on a shoestring budget, this isn't just a horror film, it's a cultural shockwave. The story is painfully simple. 5 friends road-tripping through rural Texas fall prey to a cannibalistic family. But what elevates it beyond simple slashers is the film's unrelenting realism. Shot on 16mm, often with natural light, it feels less like a movie and more like a crime scene. There's barely any blood, but your mind fills in horrors worse than any gore. At the center stands Leatherface, an icon forged in shrieks and screams. His chainsaw isn't just a weapon, it's a wail of madness. And when Marilyn Burns runs through the woods in her blood-soaked dress, laughing and sobbing at once, you're not sure she made it out with her sanity. Banned in several countries and wrongly assumed to be a true story, Texas Chainsaw terrified audiences with its nihilism. It didn't just show evil, it made you feel like you'd stepped inside its house, and once you did, you couldn't scrub off the dirt. The Beyond, 1981. Imagine falling into a nightmare where logic collapses and only terror remains. That's The Beyond, Lucio Fulci's Italian masterpiece of surreal grindhouse horror. The plot, if you can call it that, follows a woman who inherits a Louisiana hotel built over one of the 7 gateways to hell. But what unfolds is a hallucinatory descent into madness. Eyes are gouged, faces melted with acid, tarantulas devour a man alive. And yet, The Beyond isn't about plot. It's about mood, death, and that sickening feeling of inevitability. Fulci drenches every scene in atmosphere. From fog-shrouded cemeteries to blood-soaked basements, the visuals evoke dread like poetry, written in red ink. The film's final image, 2 characters trapped in a barren, blind eternity, is one of horror's most unforgettable conclusions. You don't just watch The Beyond, you survive it. Dismissed as incomprehensible by some, worshipped as genius by others, The Beyond is grindhouse cinema elevated to nightmare art. It's beautiful, it's broken, and once it grabs your soul, it doesn't let go. Don't Look in the Basement, 1973. The title warns you, the film punishes you for not listening. In Don't Look in the Basement, a young nurse arrives at a secluded mental institution only to find that the doctor has been murdered and the patients may now be running the place. Shot in a single house with eerie stillness and low-budget grit, the film builds slow, mounting tension. The characters, a nymphomaniac, a childlike killer, a delusional general, create an unstable powder keg of personalities ready to explode. And when the truth is revealed, it's more disturbing than any ghost or ghoul. Director S.F. Brownrigg crafted a bleak, claustrophobic world that feels like a stage play written by madness. The atmosphere drips with dread. There's no soundtrack to guide you, only silence, broken by screams. It's not flashy, it's not gory. But Don't Look in the Basement grips you by the spine with its sense of inevitability. When the violence comes, it's savage and personal. The basement holds secrets, and you'll wish you never opened that door. Maniac, 1980. The camera pans. You see the woman. Then, you become the killer. Maniac takes you inside the twisted mind of Frank Zito, a sweaty, mumbling loner who stalks and scalps women in seedy 1980s New York. Played with terrifying commitment by Joe Spinell, Frank isn't a monster in a mask. He's the monster next door. William Lustig directs with brutal intimacy, placing the audience in Frank's shoes. Literally, you see through his eyes. You hear his hallucinated voices. You feel his compulsion. It's voyeuristic, uncomfortable, and relentless. Tom Savini's special effects are legendary, especially the infamous shotgun head explosion that left audiences gasping. But beyond the gore, Maniac explores loneliness, trauma, and the inner decay of a soul. There's no escape, no comfort, just a slow spiral into psychosis. The final scene, a grotesque vision of comeuppance, lingers long after the credits roll. Maniac doesn't just disturb you, it infects you. It turns horror inward and shows you what it looks like when the human mind breaks and takes the body with it. The Toolbox Murders, 1978. It starts with a toolbox and ends with a nightmare. The Toolbox Murders opens like a voyeur's dream and quickly descends into a blood-soaked frenzy. A ski-masked man stalks a Los Angeles apartment complex using tools, a drill, a screwdriver, a claw hammer, not to build, but to destroy. One by one, young women fall victim to his twisted craftsmanship. What begins as an exploitative slasher slowly morphs into something darker. There's a religious obsession lurking beneath the surface. The killer isn't just violent, he thinks he's righteous, and that's what makes him even more terrifying. Directed by Dennis Donnelly and originally dismissed as just another sleaze fest, the film has gained cult status for its grimy atmosphere, brutal kills, and eerie unpredictability. The murders feel cold and matter-of-fact, devoid of flair, which makes them even more unsettling. It was banned in the UK as a video nasty, and for good reason. The Toolbox Murders doesn't try to entertain you. It wants to disturb you, confront you, and show you what horror looks like when it hides behind a neighbor's door. Elsa Shewolf of the SS, 1975. She's beautiful, she's brutal, she's unforgettable. Elsa Shewolf of the SS is one of the most controversial Grindhouse films ever made, a Nazi-exploitation epic that tests the limits of taste and sanity. Diane Thorne stars as Elsa, the sadistic commandant of a Nazi death camp who uses torture and sex to control her prisoners. Inspired by the rumored medical atrocities of World War II, the film plunges into a nightmare of mutilation and twisted power dynamics. It's equal parts erotica and horror, a grotesque mashup that's been condemned and defended in equal measure. Shot on the old Hogan's Heroes set, Elsa became a Grindhouse legend, spawning sequels and censorship battles across the globe. It was banned outright in several countries and remains a lightning rod for debate. Is it exploitation? Absolutely. Is it historical? Loosely. But Elsa carved a place in horror infamy, not just for its brutality, but for how it dares you to keep watching, even when your conscience begs you to look away. Deranged, 1974. Ed Gein, the real-life ghoul who inspired Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs, gets his most faithful depiction in Deranged. Unlike its flashier cousins, this film tells the story of Ezra Cobb with quiet, eerie realism. No chainsaws, no dramatic music, just one man, his dead mother, and a decaying farmhouse full of secrets. Shot like a grim documentary, Deranged lets you into Ezra's world, a soft-spoken, mother-obsessed man who starts robbing graves, and soon escalates to murder. There's no camp, no irony, just rot, loneliness, and madness. The makeup effects, done by a young Tom Savini, are grotesquely realistic, especially when Ezra preserves the bodies of his victims like homemade dolls. But what truly unnerves is Roberts Blossom's performance. So sincere, so gentle, it makes the horror even more horrific. Deranged is Grindhouse horror at its most psychologically potent. It doesn't scream. It whispers, and those whispers haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Eaten Alive, 1976. Before Chainsaw, Tobe Hooper gave us another Southern fried nightmare, Eaten Alive. Set in a murky Louisiana swamp, the film follows Judd, a demented hotel owner who murders guests with a scythe and feeds their bodies to his pet crocodile. Yes, really, the entire movie feels like it's dipped in sweat and madness. Neon lighting clashes with decaying sets. Characters scream nonsense. Reality bends with each scene. It's less like watching a story and more like enduring a fever dream. Neville Brand plays Judd with a manic, mumbling energy, turning him into a human pressure cooker of trauma and rage. Future stars like Robert Englund pop in for quick, gruesome exits. Critics dismissed Eaten Alive as incoherent trash, but Grindhouse fans saw its beauty. Raw, dirty, and deeply uncomfortable. It's a vision of the South, not through a lens, but through a nightmare. And once you check into Judd's hotel, there's no guarantee you'll check out. Don't Go in the House, 1979. Fire purifies, or so Donnie Kohler believes. In Don't Go in the House, Donnie is a lonely man, emotionally crippled by years of abuse from his fanatically religious mother. When she dies, something inside Donnie snaps. He constructs a steel-walled crematorium in his basement and begins luring women home. Inspired by real-life killers and shot with eerie detachment, this film isn't just a slasher, it's a psychological horror that explores trauma, repression, and the terrifying legacy of childhood abuse. Donnie doesn't see himself as a killer. He thinks he's helping these sinful women. The standout scene, his first kill, shown in excruciating slow motion as flames consume the room, is still one of the most disturbing sequences in Grindhouse history. There's no music, just fire, screams, silence. Don't Go in the House was censored, banned, and condemned. But it's also a grim portrait of a man who was destroyed long before he struck his first match. It's not just horror, it's tragedy dressed in ash and shadows. Torso, 1973. Long before slashers had rules, Torso made them, and then broke them. Directed by Italian master Sergio Martino, this giallo Grindhouse hybrid combines brutal sex murders with razor-sharp tension and a final act that set the blueprint for Halloween, Friday the 13th, and beyond. The story begins in Rome, where a black-gloved killer stalks young university women. But when a group of girls retreats to a countryside villa for safety, the real carnage begins. The film shifts gears from murder mystery to home invasion survival horror, locking the viewer in with the final girl as she tries to outwit a killer lurking inches away. Unlike many giallos, Torso is raw and aggressive. The camera lingers too long. The deaths are personal and sadistic. And yet, Martino balances this with dreamlike visuals, pulsing sound design, and a sense of dread that never lets up. Banned in several countries for its sexual violence, Torso earned a reputation as one of the most disturbing entries in the Italian horror canon. But for those who can stomach it, it's a masterclass in tension and the birth cry of the slasher age. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. Out in the desert, the American dream meets the American nightmare. Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes is a brutal, sun-scorched tale of survival, cannibalism, and moral collapse. A wholesome family on a road trip crashes in a remote stretch of Nevada and becomes prey for a savage tribe of mutant cannibals. But this isn't just a horror film, it's a commentary on class warfare, Cold War paranoia, and the myth of civilized superiority. The family, armed with guns and suburban values, finds itself mirroring the violence of the monsters they're fighting. Who's the real savage? Michael Berryman, with his haunting physical features, became the face of the film, an embodiment of human mutation and misunderstood horror. The violence is graphic, the tone is relentless, and Craven, yet again, asks if revenge redeems or corrupts. Shot with gritty realism and almost no budget, The Hills Have Eyes doesn't just scare you. It challenges everything you think you know about heroism, family, and survival. Combat Shock, 1984. You've never seen despair filmed like this. Combat Shock is the Grindhouse cousin of Taxi Driver and The Deer Hunter, but stripped of gloss and hope. Made on a shoestring budget by Buddy Giovinazzo, it follows Frankie, a Vietnam veteran, as he descends into madness in the rotting slums of Staten Island. Frankie has no job, a starving baby deformed by Agent Orange, and a pregnant wife on the brink. Every door he knocks on closes in his face. As his PTSD worsens, he starts hallucinating flashbacks, gunfire, ghosts, and then reality begins to bleed with nightmare. The film ends with one of the most shocking and devastating final sequences in Grindhouse history. No spoilers, but it's not for the faint of heart. Combat Shock isn't just horror. It's existential dread made celluloid. It was booed, banned, then rediscovered by cult fans who saw the truth. This isn't exploitation. It's a cry for help, smeared in dirt, blood, and urban rot. Reanimator, 1985. If Frankenstein had a punk rock baby with the Evil Dead, it would look like Reanimator. Directed by Stuart Gordon and based loosely on an H.P. Lovecraft story, this is Grindhouse horror at its most absurd, brilliant, and blood-spattered. Jeffrey Combs plays Herbert West, a brilliant but unhinged medical student who invents a glowing green serum that brings the dead back to life, with terrible side effects. From decapitated heads that talk to corpses that go berserk, Reanimator doesn't just cross lines, it dances on them. The gore is outrageous, the humor twisted, and the pacing breathless. What makes it truly special is Combs's performance. His West is not a mad scientist caricature. He's focused, intelligent, and dangerously obsessed. You believe he'd do anything for his experiment, even kill, even die. Banned in several countries for its gleeful violence and necrophilic overtones, Reanimator has become a midnight movie legend. It's horror without restraint, intellect wrapped in insanity. A finale to this list as mad and magnificent as Grindhouse itself. Grindhouse horror was never about polish, it was about passion, rebellion, and pushing boundaries. These 17 films dared to go where others wouldn't. They scarred, thrilled, and electrified generations. And whether banned, butchered, or beloved, they remain unforgettable. Which one haunted you the most? Let us know, and don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic nightmares.